The movie opens on Rocket Raccoon's childhood where we see a bunch of tiny baby raccoons playing in a cage. They all get alert when they see a mysterious man approaching them. Tiny Rocket remains still and the man grabs him. The movie then shifts to the present where we see Rocket on Nowhere with the rest of the Guardians still goofing around. Rocket goes to the bar for a drink and finds Peter Quill, Star-Lord, drunk and passed out. Peter was still reeling from the loss of Gamora and his mental health was getting worse. Peter faints and Nebula takes him back to his room. Kraglin was now using Yondu's whistle arrow but he was still very amateur at it. He competes with Cosmo, the space dog, to see who can perform better with their telekinetic powers. Cosmo was an Earth dog that could move things with her mind. Kraglin fails to use the arrow properly and loses to Cosmo, so everyone makes fun of him. Kraglin and Cosmo now meet with Nebula and the rest of the gang. They all worry about Quill's health while grabbing a snack. Later, Rocket goes to his room to rest. Meanwhile, we meet a new and powerful character called Adam Warlock who was after Rocket. Adam makes his way to Nowhere and attacks Rocket. Peter wakes up and sees Rocket escaping from Adam while Nebula notices Adam and confronts him. She blasts him away but Adam manages to get back up, unscratched. He fights Nebula, breaks her jaw, and tosses her away like a toy. Groot enters the fight and jumps on Adam. Adam flies away with Groot and overpowers Groot as well. He lands back on the ground and severs Groot's head from his body. Rocket and Mantis go to the armory for weapons but Adam arrives there and blasts Rocket in the chest. Mantis attacks him but he grabs her by her arm and breaks it. Star-Lord arrives and shoots Adam. Meanwhile, Drax grabs Adam and throws him outside. Drax puts up a good fight but Adam turns the table on him and beats Drax to a pulp until Nebula enters the battle and stabs Adam from the back, wounding him severely. Adam flies away while Rocket gets injured badly. They scan his body and discover that Rocket has an auto-dismantle device in his body that can only be cracked by a code. This device is made by a company called Orgo Corp and it was slowly ending Rocket's life. Nebula mentions that she has a contact who can get them into the Orgo Corp facility, so the Guardians journey to Orgo Corp in search of the code, to save Rocket. Now, we see a flashback of Rocket's heartbreaking and eye-tearing past. The mystery man who grabbed Rocket was a man called the High Evolutionary. He experimented on Rocket by surgically operating on his brain, turning him from an ordinary raccoon to a high-functioning, intelligent, and talking raccoon. Rocket was part of High Evolutionary's 89th batch of experimentations and Rocket was named 89P13. The baby Rocket gets thrown into a cage where he meets the rest of the batch 89 experiments, Lilla, Teefs, and Floor. Rocket gets afraid meeting all of them at first but Lilla reassures him he's safe. Baby Rocket shivers in pain and utters his first word, which is hurts. In the present, we learn that Adam Warlock is a sovereign, working under the High Priestess Aisha, whom we met in the previous Guardians film. Adam and Aisha visit High Evolutionary who turns out to be their creator and had assigned them to bring him Rocket as well. High Evolutionary gives Aisha another chance and threatens her that he'll destroy their entire race if they don't bring him Rocket. Meanwhile, the Guardians reach the Orgo Corp headquarters and it's a giant organic living matter that is used as a space station. This was High Evolutionary's manufacturing facility which he used as a front to avoid his illegal experimentations getting exposed. The Guardians breach the facility's invisible security barriers but they get hijacked by the Ravagers, led by Stackaro Gord. Peter tries to negotiate with them but Nebula reveals her contact led them here and that contact was Gamora. This was the Gamora from the past whom we met in Avengers Endgame. The Ravagers hand the Guardians red suits to disguise as Orgo Corp employees and assign Gamora to accompany them. They get prepared. Meanwhile, Rocket is reliving his childhood memories. Rocket sits on the lap of the High Evolutionary and solves complex calculations that fascinate High Evolutionary and his recorders, Thiel and Vim. High Evolutionary shows Rocket the new civilization he's building on a planet called Counter-Earth. Rocket sees the blue sky for the first time and notices a rocket flying in the sky. He gets inspired, so High Evolutionary shows Rocket his new project. He shows Rocket that he's experimenting on Batch 90 now, which will inherit Counter-Earth. He takes low-life forms animals and puts them in a gas chamber. The gas evolves the animals into thousands of years of evolution in a matter of moments, but the problem arises that they all turn out to be violent and full of rage. This was bothering High Evolutionary because Rocket was very peaceful and civilized but Batch 90 was the opposite. That's why he was after Rocket for so long. Young Rocket points out High Evolutionary's mistake regarding the gas chamber and corrects it. Back in the present, the Guardians suit up and land on the Orgo Corp facility. Quill talks with Gamora while Nebula cuts a hole for them to enter the facility. Quill expresses his feelings for Gamora and the lovely time he shared with her when the present Gamora was alive. This Gamora was still a mean fighter and a daughter of Thanos who didn't care about love or having a family. She shuts down Quill, declaring nothing is going to happen between them because it wasn't her whom Quill loved. Nebula finishes her job and they all enter the facility. They take off their space suits and blend in. They all spread in teams and search the facility. Peter Quill tries to charm his way in, but the mean green Gamora holds a girl hostage and forces her to find the code they're looking for. Eventually, they find a file on Rocket, but the security system notices them and attacks them. Drax and Mantis get in a fight with the guards until Groot comes to the rescue and they all fly back with Gamora. We see another flashback of Rocket with his batchmates. Rocket informs them about High Evolutionary's plan to set them free from their cages and out into the blue and forever sky of Counter-Earth. Besides Rocket, none of them had seen a sky before, so they all dreamt of going into the open. Back in the present, the Guardians go through the file they retrieved from Orgo Corp. They see how the High Evolutionary experimented and tortured a tiny Rocket. They try to find the passcode of Rocket's kill switch in the file, but it had been removed recently by Thiel, one of High Evolutionary's recorders. They search for Thiel and find that he's with the High Evolutionary on a planet called Counter-Earth. They all waste no time to save their friend and set their course to Counter-Earth to face the High Evolutionary. Gamora tries to warn them, saying it's a trap, but Peter disagrees, saying it's not a trap but a face-off because they know it's a trap. Gamora tells them about the High Evolutionary, stating he's a very powerful and ancient being. The Guardians don't listen or care and ignore Gamora, so she urges them to drop her back with her people. He tries to convince Gamora that the present Gamora wanted to be with them like a family and not with a band of mercenaries. Gamora grows weary of Peter's sentiment for her and gets in a fight with him, but Nebula intervenes and stops her. Nebula reminds her they are out of time to save Rocket, who matters more than her. The movie shifts back in time again and shows young Rocket sleeping with Floor when a seemingly drunk High Evolutionary rushes into Rocket's cage area, yelling for Rocket. He takes Rocket back to his lab and shows him that he corrected the mistake with the gas chamber that Rocket pointed and it worked. High Evolutionary gets furious in disbelief that Rocket, his creation, was able to solve something that he himself couldn't figure out for months. He shows Rocket a bunch of successful experiments. Rocket gets excited and asks if they're ready to leave for Counter-Earth. High Evolutionary mocks Rocket and makes him realize that Batch 89 was never meant for the New World. Because it was just a medley of mistakes from which they could learn and apply to creatures that truly matter, like the new Batch 90. High Evolutionary orders his servants to prepare Rocket for surgery so he can study his brain further and incinerate the rest of Batch 89. Now, they arrive at Counter-Earth and notice it's a duplicate of Earth but from the 80s. They land their ship, the Bowie, and the people of Counter-Earth gather around in curiosity. The residents were all civilized animals, living exactly like humans. Peter tells the citizens they come in peace, but Drax idiotically smacks a baby girl in the face with a basketball. They all get offended and start throwing rocks at the Guardians until Groot grows taller and scares them off. One lady falls and hurts her leg, so Quill helps her and asks for help to find a man named Thiel. The lady takes them to her home and tries to communicate with them. The Guardians manage to explain that they're here to help their friend and are looking for a man who works for the High Evolutionary. She points towards a huge building and it was the High Evolutionary's lab. Quill borrows their car to head to the lab with Groot and Nebula while appointing Drax and Mantis to stay back to protect Rocket and their ship in case anything happens. Gamora's back at the ship and notices Quill driving pathetically towards the lab, while Quill and Nebula notice that the Society of Counter-Earth isn't exactly perfect either. They reach the lab, but the Freak Pig and Hawk guards insist on Nebula to wait outside because she has a weaponized arm. Groot and Quill meet the High Evolutionary. High Evolutionary makes them wait while the movie flashes back. Thiel takes Rocket back to his cage and leaves. Rocket immediately tells Lilla and Teefs that they have to get out because High Evolutionary is going to eradicate them instead of freeing them. Rocket uses his intelligent mind and makes a mechanic card to get out of his cage. He frees Lilla as well and hugs her until the High Evolutionary shoots Lilla in the back and murders her. Rocket mourns Lilla's death while High Evolutionary mocks him for whining and commands him to return to his cell. But Rocket had enough of him and attacks him. Rocket starts scratching his face violently until he passes out. High Evolutionary's security guards arrive and shoot at Rocket, but they miss, so Rocket uses High Evolutionary's gun and shoots all the guards. Rocket turns around to rescue Floor and Teefs, but the guards had not missed their shots and had shot Teefs and Floor to their death. Rocket realizes he's all alone and broken, so he runs away. He steals a spaceship from the High Evolutionary and flies away. He smiles for a very brief moment because he finally got to fly in the eternal and blue sky, but at the cost of losing all his friends. Meanwhile, Drax and Mantis ditch their post and head towards the lab to help Quill. Back in the lab, Quill approaches Recorder Thiel and asks him to hand over his cybernetic head transplant because it might contain the passkey to Rocket's kill switch. The High Evolutionary finally intervenes and introduces himself to Quill. He mentions that he visited Earth a long time ago and was inspired to make Counter-Earth. The High Evolutionary stalls them for some time while his recorders send War Pig to retrieve Rocket from the ship. Gamora realizes an alarm and finds War Pig kidnapping Rocket. She gets in a fight with War Pig while Adam and Aisha arrive at Counter-Earth. War Pig beats Gamora but gets attacked by Adam Warlock. Adam tells War Pig he needs to retrieve Rocket to save his entire civilization and beheads her. He looks around and finds Rocket missing. Gamora runs away with Rocket and goes to the other side of the ship from outside. Meanwhile, Quill gets into a debate with High Evolutionary regarding the people of Counter-Earth. Quill mentions his creation is corrupt and High Evolutionary agrees with Quill and bombs the entire planet. He takes off in his lab, which turns out to be a massive spaceship while the planet starts blowing up. Adam tries to save Aisha but she gets destroyed in a blast. Adam hardly flies back to Gamora and faints. Meanwhile, Drax, Mantis, and Nebula climb on the High Evolutionary ship to rescue Peter and Groot while Gamora takes off in their ship with Rocket. High Evolutionary walks away while Thiel laughs at Quill for falling into their so obvious trap. Peter still disagrees and repeats that it's a face-off and orders Groot to kill them all. Groot launches a hidden grenade from his chest and takes out a lot of guns including Peter's blasters. Groot and Star-Lord fight and defeat the High Evolutionary men. Thiel begs Peter to spare him but Peter spears him out of the spaceship and Groot jumps behind him. Nebula, Drax, and Mantis get into the ship but Groot and Peter are on the ground now. They discover that there are many more people and animals on whom the High Evolutionary has been experimenting. Meanwhile, Groot grabs Quill from the back and they land safely while smashing Thiel on the ground and ripping off his cybernetic headpiece. Gamora crashes their ship near them so Quill and Groot climb aboard. They scan Thiel's headpiece and it unlocks Rocket's kill switch. Rocket wakes up and they all hug in relief and joy. Rocket asks what's going on and points out that Nebula's been trying to contact them for quite some time. Quill talks with Nebula and realizes that they have to rescue Nebula, Drax, and Mantis now. The High Evolutionary arrives and attacks Nebula and others. He tells Quill to bring him Rocket to save his friends or he's going to murder all of them. Peter now contacts Kraglin and asks for his help. Rocket suits up and heads with Peter, Groot, and Gamora to fight the High Evolutionary once and for all. They confront the High Evolutionary's spaceship to deceive them while Kraglin arrives with the entire Skull of Nowhere, modified now into a massive spaceship. Kraglin fires at High Evolutionary's ship from behind, damaging half of the ship. High Evolutionary orders to unleash all of his hell spawns on the Guardians. Meanwhile, Adam, who was tied in the Guardian's ship, breaks free and joins the battle. The hell spawns are in thousands and they infiltrate Nowhere as well, attacking the citizens. Kraglin and Cosmo try to save everyone but Kraglin still fails to use Yondu's arrow. He sees the hell spawn wreaking havoc in their home and suddenly sees Yondu's ghost standing in the chaos, telling Kraglin to use his heart to fly the arrow. Kraglin takes the advice and manages to team up with Cosmo and save the day. Meanwhile, Rocket, Quill, and Gamora make it into the High Evolutionary ship. High Evolutionary gets notified so he quickly sends his men to capture Rocket. His recorder, Vim, continuously warns him to retreat because their ship can't take any more damage but his obsession with Rocket is going to get them all killed. Vim holds a gun on High Evolutionary and orders the pilot to retreat but High Evolutionary destroys all of them. Quill and Rocket reunite with the rest of the Guardians and decide to leave but Rocket informs Quill there are more creatures on the ship and they have to rescue all of them. The Guardians of the Galaxy head back into the ship and face the High Evolutionary army in an awesome hallway fight. The Guardians destroy all of the army and board everyone to Nowhere. Meanwhile, Rocket visits his old chamber and finds his cage, labeled Raccoons from Earth. Rocket finally accepts his nature but High Evolutionary arrives and jumps on Rocket, trying to take his revenge for what he did to his face. Rocket defends himself and the rest of the Guardians arrives and kick the High Evolutionary's butt together. Gamora lands the final blow and peels off High Evolutionary's prosthetic face mask. Rocket doesn't kill High Evolutionary and arrests him because he's a Guardian of the Galaxy. Everyone makes it back to their ship. Afterward, Peter bids farewell to Gamora and she heads back with the Ravagers. The Guardians hold a final meeting where Peter decides to take a break and return to Earth to visit his grandfather. Mantis and Drax also take a break to discover themselves, leaving Rocket to be the new leader of the team. Peter lands on Earth and reunites with his grandpa while the Guardians of the Galaxy dance with a happy ending. Hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching and see you next time.